Hey, everybody, how's it going? It's March the 18th, and this is the Thursday night Flipping America RIA meeting. I'm so glad you're here. First of all, somebody put in the chat that you can hear me. If you're joining us on Facebook and YouTube right now, say hello in the comments there. We will see them. I've got that screen open right over here. I'm ready to say hello to you. This is a networking event. Somebody tell me you can see me, or you can hear me. I know you can see me. Put in the chat. Somebody, anybody, can you hear me? Is my microphone on? It's pegging here. Can you hear me, Bob?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
All right, good. Bob's in the green room. He can hear me, but no one in the Zoom call is saying that you can hear me yet. I got to wait. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Everybody was being shy, I suppose. So you can hear me. That's great. All right, not all of you were here yesterday, but we had a little fun with the idea of the pledge. And I introduced the idea of a pledge called the Man Pledge from an old obscure TV show. And nobody guessed it. And I forgot to give the answer before we went off the air. And I apologize for that. My bad. Maybe the only mistake I made yesterday. But the pledge goes like this. You raise your right hand and repeat after me. This was a Moose Club thing. It was a man's club, okay? And here's the pledge. I am a man, but I can improve. That was the full pledge. And I thought it was hilarious. And the show ran from the 90s to I didn't even know it went to 2006, but I just looked it up. It was called The Red Green Show. And if you ever get a chance to see this show, it's a spoof of home improvement shows and fishing shows and outdoor shows. It kind of spoofs on all of them. And it was hilarious. I used to sit up late just to watch that show. Bob, have you ever heard of that show?
I never have. It sounds great, though.
All right. Anyway, I could tell you all more, but speaking of the pledge, it's time for us to do the pledge. Now, I'm going to play the video of the pledge, but I want you to say it along with us, okay? So here comes the Flipping America pledge. This is us taking responsibility for ourselves. And let me just provide a little exegesis on one part of the pledge. Have you ever said to somebody, "How you doing?" And they said to you, "Well, pretty good under the circumstances." The smart aleck in me always wants to say, "Well, what are you doing under them?" That's why there's part of the pledge that says, you got circumstances, I got circumstances, we all got circumstances, but you won't find me under mine. All right? So I want you to have that little bit of extra meaning when it comes to that point in the pledge. So here it comes.
When I look in the mirror, I see the reason, the credit for my successes, the blame for my failures. I cannot make it without my team, and I tell them often. But when they succeed, it's because I chose well and I led well. When they fail, it's because I did not choose or lead well. I am the reason. I may have setbacks, but I cannot fail if I don't ever give up. You got circumstances. I got circumstances. We all got circumstances, but you won't find me under mine. My situation will not dictate my emotion. My circumstances will not control my results. External forces will not take away my power to choose. I cannot change the world, but I can change me and the way I relate to it. So I charge on. I am the reason. I have a massive vision, which creates massive pressure, leading to massive action, which is the only chance I have to achieve massive results. The world doesn't owe me success. God doesn't owe me success. No one is going to work for my success. Therefore, no one will work harder for their success than I will for mine. I will give my all and then a bit more. So tomorrow, my all will be more.
All right, we're back. It's time for the announcements now. And I'm going to move through the announcements as quickly as we can because I want to give Bob as much time as we can to find out about asset protection. I think I'm going to ask you some things about estate planning too. I've got several questions lined up for you. All right, this is the topic for tonight. Asset protection. Bob Bluhm is here. He's in the green room and he's ready to go. Next Wednesday at 12:30, we meet every 12:30 every Wednesday. That's easy for me to say, right? Every Wednesday at 12:30 for a little gathering to over lunchtime. The idea for the Flipping America RIA is one day when the pandemic is lifted, we're going to be gathering in restaurants around the country for lunchtime and tuning in to that nut from Atlanta that's sitting there talking about real estate. That's how this whole thing got started. A lunchtime meeting where we're talking about real estate. The first time we did this was at a little local pizzeria Italian place right here in Midtown Atlanta, and there were 2 people. And then that grew to 6 and 7 and then 50. And then we launched in 2020 the Flipping America RIA, which today is 30 chapters nationwide with 10,200 members. Is that not cool? That's pretty awesome. Now, not all of them are on this call, but that's their fault. They're missing out. But anyway, so next we're keeping the Wednesday thing alive. And one of these days we'll be back at meeting in restaurants and joining the Zoom call and just having fun. I'll skip lunch at Baranda just to come sit here in the studio and visit with all of you around the country. But next Wednesday, my good friend Don DeRosa is going to join us, and we're going to talk about real estate investing tech. What's the latest technology? Don is one of the most technology-oriented guys I've ever seen, but he's smart about it. He doesn't just try every little thing that comes out. He's got a filter. And so we want to talk about that filter and understand when to adopt and when to wait and be on the leading edge, but not the bleeding edge. And we'll do that next week with Don DeRosa. And then next Thursday night in this time slot, I've got my good friends, Ton, Michelle, and Scott Ulmer coming to talk with us. They recently talked with us about creative acquisition methods, and now they're doing the follow-up topic, creative exit strategies, how to maximize your profits with terms. And so it's not just a matter of sell the house for cash. You may make more money if you sell the house with terms. And it's pretty related to what we do with the Boer houses and the Flipping America Buyers Club, but not exactly. They expand on that, go a lot deeper, and that'll be next Thursday night. Then the following week, I just want to let you know now, this has been on in our calendar since the start of the year. That week is spring vacation week for my wife and me. We are out, no meetings on March 31st or April the 1st. We'll be back April the 7th. We've already got some really cool stuff lined up for April and some different things. And wait till you see the new site. I'll let you in on a little secret. The new Flipping America RIA site is already live, but we're really going to be talking about that a lot April the 1st. We're a little bit ahead of the game there. All right. If you have one of these devices or one of the other related devices, you can say, Alexa, play the podcast Flipping America, and the magic will happen. That's so cool. I wish I had, set up the programming for it. I didn't. It's a skill she already had. All right. So this is Flipping America. It is several things. It is first and foremost a coast-to-coast broadcast 3 times a week, Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Right after that, we turn it into a podcast that's released on 35 internet platforms, including whatever platform you listen to. But if you can't find it, you can also download our free app from the App Store, whichever App Store you're in, and listen to the show that way. It is a RIA. This is one of the RIA meetings every Wednesday and Thursday. Not once a month, but twice a week. We meet to provide incredible value and content and inspiration and information for your real estate business. It is an academy. We're growing our inventory of online courses, and the dream is we are going to be a for real academy. For those of you that don't know, I have been a college professor. I have a master's degree in education. I am officially certified to do a real academy, and it will be a real academy, and we're going to have credit hours, and there will even be a certificate. That's later on this year. Before that, we've got some other things that are going to happen. The Buyers Club's already happened. This is a done-for-you service where we'll buy inexpensive houses, teach you how to sell or finance them, and make killer cash flow. That's a private club. You have to join, and we're not even going to talk tonight about how to join it. If you really want to join this, we are in April. We are opening up for 40 more members, but we always keep a kind of a lid on the membership and the growth so we can make sure we can handle everybody that's there. All right. And then the Flipping America Network, the trading platform, is coming out. We didn't make the April 1st deadline. It's not going to be there. Sorry, we're not going to be ready. We're now hoping mid-April. We keep pushing it back, but we want it to be really great when it comes out. And I think you'll agree that it will be. The feedback from our user group was The concept is great, but we have some bugs to shake out, and so we're shaking out the bugs. And so we'll be announcing the fan. We're going to devote a whole hour to it one Thursday night. All right. That brings us to the topic for the night. The topic for the night is asset protection. Let me bring in our guest.
When you choose American IRA as your self-directed IRA administrator versus the other guys, you're choosing a path that will save you money without sacrificing expertise or performance. Because unlike the other guys, we do not work on a sliding scale of fees. We offer one low set annual administration fee. Let's take a closer look. As your assets grow with American IRA, your annual fee remains the same. The other guys base their fees on the number of assets you own or the value of your account. So over the life of your self-directed IRA, your annual fees will continue to increase year after year. What does this mean for you? When you work with us, you'll have more money to put towards the important things in your life, like retirement. We know that there are already enough places your money has to go. From your state and local government to the IRS. Don't let your self-directed IRA administrator take more from you than they should. So with American IRA, no matter how your assets grow over the life of your investment, you'll pay one low set annual fee, putting you in total control of your financial future. Choosing American IRA means you're choosing expertise, value, and performance.
Sorry about that, Bob. I missed my cue.
It's okay.
I was supposed to hush up and play that commercial. But thanks, American IRA. We appreciate your partnership. And if you guys are looking for a way to do self-directed investing, then definitely check out AmericanIRA.com/flipping America. And I also want to send a shout out to Bay Mountain Capital. Chip couldn't be with us tonight. He's almost always on every call. Bay Mountain Capital provides funding for real estate deals. If you need funding for a flip or a rental, great people, great products, really great terms, and great service. So that's BayMountainCapital.com. All right, Bob, welcome. Good to see you, man.
Thank you. Good to see you, Roger.
I enjoyed our brief conversation a couple of weeks ago when we were getting ready for this, and your approach to the whole thing. But you know what? I want to begin just by assuming that we've got some people here who are brand new to this whole idea of asset protection and this kind of planning. And so let's kind of get back to square one. What does it mean when we're talking about asset protection, and why do we need it?
Well, I like to think of it in terms of a football game for a metaphor. And, in football, you got offense and you got defense. And you need a good defense, every bit as good as your offense, to win the game. And so you're teaching people offense. That's how to make money in real estate. I teach people how to keep their money. And that's defense. So you got to have both. Doesn't do much good to make a bunch of money and then lose it to taxes or lose it in a lawsuit or anything else. So what I do is asset protection really involves three things. It's tax reduction, it's lawsuit protection, and it's estate planning as well. So those three areas all go together.
Okay, three areas, and let's make sure that we cover all those. Don't let me get out of here tonight with, let's cover all of those briefly. But okay. All right, I want everybody right now that's on the Zoom call or watching on Facebook or YouTube, put your hand up. If you think to yourself, I'm a nice person, no one's ever going to sue me, put your hand up. My hand is up. I have sat where you sat. Okay, I see them. You are all nice. Brenda, I know you are so nice. I know you. No one's ever going to sue. Well, here's the thing, everybody. I want you to know, and I've got the T-shirt that says, ask me how I know. If the perception gets to be out there that you have a lot of money, a lot of assets, someone out there is just crooked enough to want to find a way to get some of that from you. And here's the dirty little secret. They can make up something and sue you, and it could be completely made up. But when they do, you've lost, because
That's
you're
right.
going to pay for your legal fees to protect yourself. And most of the time, it's going to be cheaper to settle than to defend yourself. And as a business person, you're going to settle. So they just took money from you and you did nothing wrong. Ask me how I know. I've got the T-shirt. Okay. It's happened, but it's never going to happen to me again, because I have done what Bob is about to tell you about. All right. So let's go on defense, Bob.
Roger, I couldn't have said it better. You're absolutely right, because anybody can sue anyone for any reason at any time. Now, when they sue you, it doesn't mean they have a good claim. It doesn't mean that they're going to win at trial, but there's a 95% likelihood they're never going to go to trial, because most cases, in fact, 95% of all cases filed, actually settle out of court.
Right.
And because of that, it's exactly what you said. The minute you get sued, you've already lost, because you got to pay an attorney to defend yourself. You're going to eventually settle the case in some way. And unless you have a really great defense in place, you're going to end up paying money for something you never did in the first place.
Yep. That is so true. And it hurts to admit, and it's hurtful to think about this. One time I said to my attorney, look, let's make up some stuff and sue that guy for a whole bunch of stuff to at least bring him to the bargaining table, make him shut up and drop this maybe and leave it alone. He said, you can't do that. I said, why? He said, because it's wrong. You can't just make up stuff and sue him. I said, that's what he did to me. He said, he looked at me and said, but you're not that type of person. Dang it.
Well,
let
me put it this way. If you don't want to be that type of person, then the alternative is get yourself protected before that kind of thing happens. And then you've got the kind of leverage that you were just talking about without having to be a bad guy.
Right. Because when they get ready to sue you, what's that attorney who is working on a, what do you call it? A percentage.
Contingency fee.
A contingency.
Yeah.
What are they going to look at first?
Oh, they're going to do an asset search because they're going to think of it this way. They're going to invest in your case. They're going to basically buy your case. They're going to buy a 50% interest in your case by putting up the money for the court costs and witness fees and not charging for their time. And then assuming they win, they take 50% of everything they collect. And what that means is they've got risk. And in order to quantify that risk, they have the ability to go to the internet and do an asset search where they can literally find virtually everything you own. It's a digital world out there, and that means everything is traceable unless you buried something in your backyard. It's traceable. I mean, titles in county offices are all traceable. Records at secretaries of state are all traceable, and so they can easily quantify what you have if you've made the mistake of simply owning all your assets in your personal name. They can see it all.
All right. That's the big one right there. And I can just tell you, Bob, I'm a little proud of myself now, but when they look at me, I don't have any money and I don't own a thing. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own a single asset. I control a few things, but I don't own anything.
Good for you, Roger. You're doing it exactly right, because the phrase I use is you want to be rich and you want to look broke. And when I say that, I mean, you want to look broke to a potential plaintiff's lawyer who may be doing an asset search on you. Now, people get a little freaked out when I say you want to look broke, because they say, well, how am I ever going to get a loan if I look broke? And the short response is, no. When you're getting a loan, you're going to give them a full financial statement. You're going to reveal everything to your banker at that point. But to a plaintiff's lawyer, you want to be able to look broke.
After you have the banker sign an NDA or something.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So how do you achieve this, Bob? Tell us, because there's probably a better way to do it than I did it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know, because you may have done it very, very well. You're a pretty smart guy. Look, the point is, here's Asset Protection 101. And that is, anything that you own can be seized in a lawsuit if the judgment is against you. So therefore, you want to transfer the ownership of assets into other types of entities that will protect them from a plaintiff taking them in a lawsuit. So for instance, if you have rental properties, you can transfer the rental properties into, let's say, an LLC. And when they sue Roger Blankenship, and they get a judgment against Roger, that's not the LLC, and the assets in the LLC are protected from a suit against you.
I'll give them all $450 in my checking account.
Yeah, there you go. You know, I live in Dallas, Texas, and lawyers in Texas say about people who could protect themselves but don't, they say, you know, some folks just need suing. And I hope that isn't you.
Yeah, well, you know, America is a particularly litigious society. There are more lawyers in Fulton County, Georgia, where I live, than in the entire country of Japan.
Yes.
So
no surprise.
It's something that's uniquely American, and we don't have a loser pays system, which I kind of would like. My uncle is an attorney, and he can make some compelling arguments against it. But this opens the doors for a lot of this abusive kind of stuff. But
Yes, it
we're
does.
not going to change that. I'm not running for office,
Nope.
so we're not going to fix that thing. What we have to do is protect ourselves, so we get everything out of our name. Now, how do you recommend we go about getting things out of our name?
Well, it's a process of designing an LLC or another type of entity, whether it's a trust or a limited partnership, very, very carefully. They have to be done because understand this, it's not just stamping out widgets. These cannot be cookie cutter types of entities that you're going to get online or from some, do it yourself service because it's way more complex than that. They try to make it sound really simple, push this button and you get an LLC, but it's
Yeah.
more complicated than that. There are
What?
there are 16 different kinds of LLCs. And if
Yep.
you don't know the difference between this versus that, how do you know you've got the right kind that'll actually work?
I listened to a seminar one time for a guy talking about how easy it was to set up a trust. And, for a couple $1,000s, he'd give you a piece of paper, and that's your trust. That's your kind of your boilerplate document. What do you do with it after you have it done? Stick it in a drawer? I don't know. Maybe that's true, but that didn't seem very real to me.
Well, it's not very real. Now, a trust is a little bit different than a lot of the entities. If you're going to have a lawsuit protection entity, for instance, which would be a limited liability company or limited partnership, those have to be filed with the state. Those are state created entities and they are filed and they're registered with the typically
Okay.
Secretary of State. Trusts are a little different. They're in the sense of a will. They're not entities, and so think of this: when you create a will, you do put it in a drawer and leave it there.
Yeah.
Now, the trick is this: with a trust, it actually has to be funded. In other words, for it to be effective, you actually have to transfer assets into the name of the trust, and then it becomes effective. So, otherwise, a trust is really a contract. And unless you fund it, it is worthless. It's not worth the paper it's written on.
All right. So I'm still intrigued by the idea. That's why I keep going to seminars on trusts. But um, all right. So if I came, Bob, to your office and sat down, and let's say I had for the purposes of this call, an undisclosed number of properties scattered around the country
Mhm.
that, well, I, I can feel a little bit of boldness, I guess, because, I'm pretty well layered, but not as strong as I probably would like to be. But anyway, they're in LLCs. And I think someone would have a hard time finding the name of the LLC that is actually holding title to these properties. And but let's back up. Let's just say I'm somebody coming to you and I want to be in this business and I want to start. Maybe I've bought one rental property and I heard somewhere like tonight I shouldn't have that rental property in my name. When people come to me, I usually say, all right, your first line of defense is a good insurance policy. Your next
Mhm.
line of defense is go see an asset protection lawyer and get yourself set up right. Don't take any advice from me.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure we have insurance on the properties, but like for liability and that sort of thing. But when I come in to see you, what are you going to say? Or we're going to set up a thing, and my goal is to own a bunch of rental properties, and I want to flip properties over here and use that income to buy more rental properties and maybe buy an
Mhm.
apartment complex. I don't know what I might buy down the road, but that's about as well planned as a lot of people get. So
Oh yeah,
what are we going to do?
and that's a great offensive strategy. Remember, offense is making money; it's trying to score,
Yeah,
and a lot of people will do that. Start wholesaling or flipping to raise capital in order
right.
to buy rental properties, and that's a great approach. And I also agree with you that we ought to have insurance, of course. But remember, when you get that insurance policy, all those pages of fine print are not telling you what they will cover;
That's right.
they're telling you what they won't cover.
Ask me
And
how I know.
yes, yes, yes. So, there are plenty of exclusions. And because of that, in other words, your insurance policy is really kind of a little bit like Swiss cheese. It's got holes in it.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you have a backup plan. I used to represent the world's largest airline. And I learned that on a commercial airliner, they've got two systems for everything. The plane can fly on one engine, but what if that goes out? So they always have two at least. They can fly with one pilot, but what if the one pilot has a heart attack? They better have another one. So you want to always have a backup system, and that backup system is your legal structure, which protects you from
All right.
liability, come what may. But you know what? I also want to mention it's not just, I really think of lawsuit protection in terms of two different phases. And the first is keeping you out of a lawsuit.
Yep.
It's setting up enough of a structure that the plaintiff's lawyer can look at it and say, we're not going to get anything here. And so, I'm not going to do this on a contingency fee basis. If you want to pay me $500 an hour over the next 3 years, I'll be glad to take the case. But that leaves the plaintiff pretty much out of the picture. They're not going to sue if you put the barriers to winning high enough. And that is what gives you, that's why you want to have a great legal structure in the first place. Remember, when we were all kids in elementary school, on the playground, they weren't picking on the big kid. They were picking on the little defenseless kid, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to be that little kid. You want to bulk up. Another way to say it is, if you're going to play the game, you get suited up for the game. You don't go on the football field
All right.
not wearing the helmet and the pads. So this is just part of getting suited up for the game.
So back to my question. I've come
Yeah.
to you. I'm sitting in your office.
Oh, yeah.
The attorney meter is running, and I want to know, what are we going to do to set up my flipping company and my rental properties? What do we need to do as the basic step one for asset protection here?
Well, we're going to understand what you're doing, first of all. And you just told me you're going to flip in one LLC, you're going to own rentals in another, and those are designed differently. Once again, there's 16 different kinds of LLCs. We're going to design one with a tax structure and an ownership structure different than we will from a rental property structure necessarily. So we're going to design it. We go through about 8 or 10 different steps. What state are we going to file this in? Who are the members going to be? How many members are there going to be? Are there supporting documents? How are we going to draft the operating agreement and this and that and the other things? And so before you build a house, you get a blueprint. You don't just go buy some hammers and nails. And the same thing is true. If you're going to set up an LLC, you plan it. You get a blueprint for that LLC. Most important step of all. So that's what we're going to do in the office. And then once we really know what we're doing, the implementation, the creation of the LLC is not that difficult. It's the planning stage that's the most important.
I'll tell you something, Bob, that you have no way of knowing about me, and most of the people on this call probably don't know this either. When I started in this business, a lot of people who know me know that I came into this business from the nonprofit world, having been 20 years in the ministry. And now I'm in this business for profit and doing real estate and flipping houses. And I went and sat down with a CPA one day, and he looked at me and said, "So, how do you want to structure it?" And I said, "I was kind of hoping you were going to tell me."
Well, yeah, that's his job, his or her job.
He's not my CPA, but now that was 20 years ago. But so if somebody comes into your office and they really have no idea, but they've been poking around on YouTube or somewhere on the internet, and they've got this idea, well, I need a Nevada corporation, I need a Wyoming corporation, or I need a Delaware corporation. Can you set that up for me? What are you going to say to that?
Well, the answer is yes, of course, we can set it up. But the question is that going to be a wise move? Is it necessary? First of all, we don't want to overstructure anybody. Every structure, it's going to cost some money. And there are minimal maintenance fees. So, there are plenty of structures where a two-tiered structure like that with maybe a Wyoming holding company would be appropriate. But not in every case. Everything has to be customized to your particular business, which is why we sit down with you and we listen and understand what kind of real estate you're doing, where you're doing it, what state are you working in, or states. And then we can, once we understand that, we can identify the best way to set it up for you, give you the best liability protection and lowest taxes.
Okay. But now we're still going to pay taxes, state taxes, where in the states where we're earning income, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the biggest scams out there are these radio ads that say incorporate in tax-free Nevada. Well, yeah, that works really well if you live in Nevada, but if you live in any other state with a state income tax, I don't care if you have a Nevada corporation or not, you're still going to pay state income taxes where you live.
Yes, and here's something that's some bad news for those of you that are in California. I just
Oh,
found
yes.
out that even if your LLC is set up in a different state, California is going to charge you $900 a year to own a what they call a foreign corporation.
That's right. Exactly. California's, grab for money never ends. And,
Yeah. So what we say to the
that's
people in that
exactly right.
situation in California is, "Welcome to Texas. Just don't
Yes.
vote the way you did in California."
That's right. That's right. There are actually billboards in Texas that say,
Yeah.
"Welcome, Californians. Leave your politics behind."
Yeah, I know. I've
Mhm.
seen those. But just having a little fun here. All right. Now, so if somebody is in Texas, is a Texas LLC going to serve their needs most of the time?
Well, once again, what kind of business are you doing? Are you buying rental properties in Texas? Then yes, you better darn well have a Texas LLC. Reason is you're doing business in the state, and the state wants to make sure that they understand that the Texas residents are protected and are not being taken advantage of. Furthermore, if you have an out of state entity to own Texas properties, for instance, and this applies in any state, you cannot avail yourself of the Texas courts because you do not have a Texas entity. So you have no standing. You're not a resident of Texas. You're not a citizen of Texas. So you can't sue to foreclose. You can't sue to evict a tenant. So you darn well better have an entity in the state where the rental property is located. That's critical.
That's interesting. All right,
Yeah.
but now if you are, if let's say you're doing seller financing, this is a question I didn't plan on asking you, but if you're doing seller financing and you have an LLC that's incorporated in, say, Georgia, but the property's in Pennsylvania, and you've got to foreclose on that loan, are you saying that I need to, well, not me, this hypothetical person needs to have a Pennsylvania LLC? Because how do the banks do it?
Well, I mean, typically the banks, are incorporated in 50 states, and they've got the ability to avail themselves of any court system. But depending upon where the lawsuit has to be filed, and I don't know if it's in a Georgia bank or a Georgia court because the loan was made in Georgia. I mean, that's always a question. Where do we file the case? That has to be answered. And that always usually requires some pretty important research. But if you have to go to a Pennsylvania court to do the foreclosure, then you're out of luck unless you've registered that Georgia LLC as a foreign entity in Pennsylvania. So this
Well,
is kind
that's
of getting into
interesting.
the weeds, but that's the way it's done.
Yeah, that's interesting to me.
Hmm.
Something I'll be sure to be talking to my people about. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about the actual protection that an LLC can give, because one of the things that's also floating around on the internet right now is how easy it is for lawyers to penetrate the corporate shield that's offered by a single member LLC.
Very, very true. The
Oh,
the
maybe we should
problem with
define what that means. Go ahead,
Yeah,
if you don't
single
mind.
member LLC means that you are the only member, or there's only one owner of the LLC. Members are the same as shareholders in an LLC. Shareholders are in corporations, owners are members in an LLC. So if there's only one member of the LLC, there are a number of theories or rationales for why that LLC may not protect. One of them is that there's no innocent party to protect, which was the original rationale for extending limited liability protection in the first place in a limited partnership. There's no innocent party. If the LLC did something wrong, it's you. I mean, you are the only actor in that LLC.
That's the
So
best
it's
explanation of
much
that
more
I've
likely,
heard.
yeah, much more likely they would pierce the veil of protection of the LLC. So I usually advocate to use a multi-member LLC. They're generally stronger in most states. Right at this moment, only 5 states actually recognize single-member LLCs by statute as being just as protective as multi-member LLCs. And so it's really much, much better to use a multi-member LLC in most circumstances.
But what if your single member of your LLC is a
Ah,
multi-member LLC?
There you go. Now, that makes a big difference because that's called two tiered structuring. And now that gives you significantly better liability protection than if you yourself were the single member. In addition, that kind of a structure means that the single member LLC doesn't have to pay a federal or file a federal tax return, which lowers your operating costs. So there are some advantages, but if you're going to use a single member LLC, don't try this at home. In other words, use an experienced lawyer who knows what they're doing and how to set it up properly.
All right. So now it's time for a little bit of a confession. I've already patted myself on the back for, being relatively bulletproof, but the fact is, when I started into this game and started deciding to protect myself, I had no idea what I was doing. And somebody told me I could go form my own LLCs at Secretary of State's website in Georgia, which is true. It's not that hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I ended up with sort of a mishmash of stuff. If somebody came to you with a mishmash of stuff and it needed reorganizing, can you help them scrub the floors and get their house in shape?
Yeah, that's a big part of what we do. People come to us with LLCs they've set up by themselves, and we restructure them, fix them, so to speak. We make sure that they are getting all the tax benefits they're entitled to, make sure that they really have liability protection, whereas most of the ways people set up LLCs, they don't provide any liability protection. When somebody goes to the Secretary of State website, really, it's simple. I mean, once again, it's a matter of what's the name of the LLC, what's the address of the LLC, who's the registered agent, who's the manager in a lot of states, and that's it. So you've got supposedly an LLC, but let me ask you this: how do you think that's going to protect you? When you're hauled into court and they say, "Let me see all your LLC documents," you're going to hand them a page that says, "Here's the name of the LLC," and now you think you have protection?
Right.
Sorry.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret, Bob, that all of us non-attorneys know. When we go to these government websites and there's a form there and everything seems kind of straightforward to you, we're going, what the heck does that mean? The first
Right.
time I did this, I was thinking, what's a registered agent?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I get registered if I want? Can I be my own? Is that even allowed? I'm not registered anywhere. And who knows what that means, but I'll just write something out and see if I get away with it. And guess what?
Well, and
It went
that's right.
through.
Yeah, well, and it does go through. I mean, I've seen very badly formed LLCs get approved because the Secretary of State doesn't do a qualitative analysis of your LLC. They just say, "Did you fill in this blank?" And if you did,
Yep.
even with nonsense, they'll approve it.
And
So
is
the
that
way I
name
like
being
to,
used?
yeah, exactly. The way I like to analogize it is this: if you're going to build a house, you start with a foundation, and then you build the house on top of the foundation. And if you go to the Secretary of State website and just fill out a form and that's all you don't have a house, you have a slab, you have the foundation of an LLC, but that's not any kind of an LLC that's going to do much good for you.
So what are the other pieces that need to be there? I'm not assuming that we can do these, but are you talking about like operating agreements?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it needs to be a carefully drafted, customized operating agreement, not a cookie cutter thing that everybody gets. It needs to be there needs to be minutes of an organizational meeting, membership registry. It needs to be minutes of a manager's meeting, minutes of a members meeting, various resolutions to open a bank account, resolution to purchase real estate, maybe a resolution to reimburse educational expenses, resolution to apply for credit for the company. And then membership certificates, ledgers, and oftentimes we do an estate planning component, which is a designation of successor and interest, which means if you and your wife, Roger, I don't know if you're married, but if you are, and then there you go. If you pass away, who inherits your shares of the LLC or your membership interest in the LLC? And that's what the designation of successor and interest does for you. So we draft about a dozen different documents when we create an LLC, and that is the kind of documentation that will protect you, not a one-page LLC.
Okay, Bob, let's review. You said there were 3 components to the good defense.
Yep.
They are
Tax reduction and lawsuit protection and good estate planning as well.
all right. Now we've talked about lawsuit protection.
Hmm.
Let's talk for a few minutes about tax reduction. But let me say this: if you have questions, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, put your questions in the comments. I will see them here and we'll use them. But if you're on the Zoom call, use the Q&A tab. I'm going to open up the Q&A tab while Bob is talking here. And we will make sure that we try to answer all of your questions before we get out of here. I'm saving them for the kind of the end, but put your questions there and we will get to them. So thank you. Use the Q&A tab, not the chat. I won't really see them down here in the chat. It's a different section of my screen, way down low outside of my field of vision. All right, Bob, tax reduction. What do we do?
Well, tax reduction really starts with the type of entity you're setting up. And an LLC, for instance, can be taxed one of four different ways. It can be taxed as an S corporation, it can be taxed as a C corporation, or as a sole proprietorship, or as a partnership. Any one of those four methods you may choose, but each one of those comes with its own unique set of deductions and rights and privileges. You may also say obligations. So, for example, when we have an S corporation, you're going to be you're going to be an employee of the LLC. You're going to have to take a salary. You're going to have to pay Social Security taxes on the active income that you receive. And so there are pluses and minuses to these choices that we want to make. And what we try to do is examine what kind of business you have and determine which type of tax method, what type of LLC structure is going to be able to give you the greatest number of tax deductions, lowering your taxes to the greatest extent. All right.
So is this something that we need to have like a conference call with you and our CPA?
Well, I often work with CPAs frequently because the CPA is the person who knows the numbers. And if there's some reason that the numbers dictate that they ought to be structured in one way or another, then we choose that tax election. So I often consult with CPAs when somebody has one. Otherwise, if we're just getting started, we're setting up a brand new LLC for a brand new real estate investor. We'll guide them as to what the best structure is going to be from a tax standpoint.
All right. Now, what if my CPA is in another state, say Nevada, that tax hive group?
Well, that's fine. I mean, Tax Hive is a very good group. It's a good group that can advise on tax reduction. They're tax reduction specialists, and they'll do a very nice job. The key is this: they want to be able to look at every potential deduction you're entitled to take based on the way the entity is set up, and based on the facts of your business activities. And then once those two things are put together, voila, out comes a very, very good recommendation on how you can pay the least amount of tax. So Tax
Okay.
Hive is a good group.
Okay. Yeah, I just had to throw that in there because,
Hmm.
we just had Tax Hive not too long ago here. All right. Hey, I said I was going to save the questions for the end, but Frank Morales is on the call. He said, Roger, Bob Bluhm wrote our operating agreement a few years ago. Please tell him hello for me.
Hey, good deal, Frank. Good to see you.
And the Whitbrook group says, can you explain funded? Does that mean money or property? That's a good question.
Good. Very good question. It could mean both. In other words, funding the trust. This is going back to that question about a living trust, and it has the fact that it has to be funded to be effective. First of all, let me back up a little bit. A living trust is designed to avoid probate primarily. When the estate tax exemption went to $11.58 million, most people are not going to be subject to estate taxes on a federal level. So the biggest concern is avoiding probate now with living trusts. And in order to avoid probate, the assets have to be in the trust. So in other words, if you own rental properties, you would transfer the title of those rental properties into the trust, and that is funding the trust. If you have a bank account, you would transfer the ownership of that bank account into the trust. So now the trust name or the trust rather, is the owner of that bank account. And therefore, that is what I mean by funding the trust. It could be cash, it could be stocks or securities, it could be real estate, it could be your personal residence, it could be anything of value that you don't want to have to go through probate on. Yeah, any assets left out of the trust will typically have to go through probate. And so that's what we're trying to avoid with setting up the trust in the first place. So we want to get everything we own into the trust. That is funding the trust.
Yeah, I wanted to hit those questions before we got too far away from the defensive lawsuit. Now we're talking about tax reduction, and I guess it's going to be like so many of the answers to what to the real estate questions that come to me are like. Do you remember when Bob Dole was running against Bill Clinton for president? You might be old enough.
I do, yes.
All right. And there was this thing in the news about Bill Clinton wearing boxers. And you remember that whole discussion of the president's underwear?
Can I kind of erase that image?
It was crazy.
Yeah.
So somebody asked Bob Dole, do you wear boxers or brief? He just looked at the camera and said, depends. That's terrible. That was a bad joke even then. But every time somebody asks me a question, and I think my answer is, well, it just depends on the situation. I think of that old joke. But a lot of the strategies that you're talking about for tax reduction, the answer is going to be it depends, right?
Yes, it really does. It depends on a lot of things. You know what? Just as an example, we could have the exact perfect legal structure for you, but if you don't know what deductions you're entitled to, then you're likely not to take them. That's why you need a good tax group working with you to point out the deductions that you ought to be taking.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Now, have we pretty well covered tax reduction?
Yeah, for now. Yeah.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah, for now. Hey guys, put in the chat or if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, put in the chat how much you would like for Bob to come back and just me shut up and him teach the whole time, because we talked about having him come back on one of these Thursday nights and just doing a seminar for us. Wouldn't that be cool? Put it in there. Let me see. I hope you all, yeah. Okay. The yeses are there and the sevens in our Zoom calls mean applaud. Yeah. Everybody's saying yes. And they're putting in the questions too. All right. So Bob, I think we're going to have you back to go deeper on this, but right now let's go shallow on that third leg of the three-legged stool here of defense, which was
estate planning.
Estate planning.
All right. Well, as I just mentioned, that the biggest concern in estate planning for most people is avoiding probate, making sure that their loved ones are going to inherit their assets at minimal cost, minimal hassle. In other words, think of this. If you didn't wake up tomorrow morning, you probably owe creditors some money, credit card bills or whatnot, and people probably owe you money. So if we don't have a living trust, all that is going to be settled in probate. So in other words, a judge will oversee, you'll have a lawyer who's going through, what you need, balance sheets, et cetera. And they'll make sure all the money you owe gets paid out of your estate, and all the money that is owed to you is going to get paid into your estate. And then at that point, probate is closed, and your heirs can inherit from you, from the estate, what's left. Well, that's a lengthy process. Oftentimes it involves courts and judges. And by the way, it can be expensive and it can drag on forever. I mean, I've had one client who came to me having been in probate for 10 years, if you can imagine that, because the probate is open to challenges, litigation. So most people would prefer to avoid probate if they only knew how, and by using a living trust, we can avoid probate. So your loved ones now get these assets within maybe hours after you pass away. There's minimal expense, if any, and best of all, everything remains completely private, because if you do go through probate, that creates a public record in the court, which is always public, and therefore, why do that? Most people would prefer to avoid probate. We use a living trust. Now, the two big tools in estate planning are a will and a trust. The big difference for our purposes is wills take you to probate and living trusts avoid probate.
Yeah, one of the things that I think about is a will talks about what you hope happens. A trust talks about what will happen.
Yeah, very good. Great distinction.
And of course, if you go to probate, one of my students is going to find you and start sending you cards saying, "Hey, you got any real estate you want to sell?"
Yeah,
because that's a big thing. And yeah, all right. So what you're saying then is, we're going to, what are we putting into the living trust? Are we putting our LLCs and all of our companies into a living trust?
Yeah, if you're structured properly and you're not owning these assets in your name, then let's assume that the rental properties are owned by a limited liability company, which may in turn be owned by a holding company, and that holding company would then be owned by the living trust. So ultimately, it's kind of like the Russian dolls, the Matryoshka dolls, where there's a little one inside a bigger one inside a bigger one.
Yep.
Right. That's what we're doing. We're protecting the real estate, most of all, on the innermost doll. A structure or a covering goes around that, and that's the LLC. Another LLC encompasses that. That's the holding company, perhaps, and then ultimately, everything goes into the biggest covering, and that would be the living trust. So that way, at your passing, everything simply gets handed in that big box of a living trust to your survivors. So
Yeah.
that's the ideal way to do it.
My wife and I have 5 kids between us.
Mm-hmm.
So I've thought about having different trusts set up, one for each kid. Is there any advantage to that, or is that just dumb?
No, well, you can certainly do that, and everybody's different. Every kid is different, and some kids may. Let's put it this way: we never know when we're going to pass on,
I want to leave more to my
and you never.
favorite kid.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
you never know how old your kids are going to be when you pass on, and so if you had substantial assets and your kid's 18 years old, they're probably going to blow through the money really, really fast because they don't understand money yet. And so you could establish a trust within the trust that holds that inheritance until they reach a certain age, or you could stage it to that a certain percentage goes to the kid at age 25, another percentage goes at age 30. Ultimately, they inherit everything at age 35 or 40. But that way, you give them a chance to mature and learn the real value of money so they don't blow it. Other kids may have a substance abuse problem where it would be very irresponsible to give them all kinds of money, and therefore the trustee would be empowered to withhold those distributions if the kid is having problems until the kid can get straightened out. So a lot of reasons why you may want to do that.
Well, we were going to have the trustee make available money for the kids if any of them wanted to go into their own entrepreneurial endeavor. If they could present a decent business plan, the trust would fund them.
Sure.
Until they turn 30 years old. But I'm sad to report that 3 of the 5 have already reached the age of 30, and the other 2 are not far behind. So, we ain't getting any younger, Bob.
All right. I'm afraid not.
So let me take a few questions from the group here because they're piling up a little bit, and also some of them are on this topic. Jay is joining us. He's joining us online, and he said, "Would membership in Legal Shield and their allies or their attorneys provide adequate expertise in crafting proper protection?"
Well, honestly, Jay, I don't know the answer to that because I don't know. Look, every attorney is different. Every attorney has their own area of expertise. It really depends on the individual attorney that you end up working with. And so it's impossible for me to answer that question. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of good lawyers that you could access through Legal Shield. So I assume that would be the case, but I don't know.
Yeah, and Jay and I are personal friends. So Jay, I'm just going to pick on you a little bit. It's like I've got an executive here from Publix supermarkets, and you're saying, "Well, can I get all this stuff at Kroger?" What's he going to say? So good answer, Bob. Anyway, Jay, I love you, man. All right. The Whitbrook Group says CPA or accountant.
Meaning, which one should we use?
Yeah.
Well, I'd go as high as you can, and if you can get a good accountant at a reasonable fee, I'd use a CPA. And once again, it sort of depends on what you're asking them to do. If you're a real estate investor, I'd be looking for a CPA who has lots of clients as real estate investors and knows exactly what to do.
There is a gentleman here in the Atlanta area, and I don't know where the Whitbrook Group is, but Roger Herring here in Atlanta is a good friend of mine. and he is not a CPA, but he is an accountant. However, his only clients are real estate investors, and this
There you
guy
go.
is a real nerd when it comes to the tax code and the benefits for real estate investors. That's a case where I would say accountant is fine.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I mean, look, I mean, labels are just that. It's CPA, accountant. What really counts is what do they know? What's between their ears, and what can they
yeah,
do for you?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's good. Frank, I think we kind of dealt with this, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in front of Bob anyway. How can we use the operating agreement for estate planning? Can we avoid probate using an operating agreement?
No, but no, we can't really avoid probate using an operating agreement. An operating
Okay.
agreement you should think of as kind of a constitution
Yeah.
or a binding set of rules that are legally binding on you, by the way, that tell you what you must and must not do in operating the LLC.
Right.
So it lays out the ground rules of how this LLC is going to be operated.
And if I'm right, you talked about succession a little bit, but that's not really the same as
No,
passing
that's
on your
not.
assets to your
Yeah.
heirs.
Well, let me put it this way. It is estate planning in the sense that you've provided for who is going to inherit your membership interest in the LLC. But that alone won't avoid probate.
Okay. All right. Um, More probate questions. Nina says, "Why can't the family take care of it when you pass? Why do you have to go through probate or the system? Is it a law?"
Well, yeah, frankly, it is. There are always minimum amounts of the estate or a minimum size of the estate that is exempt from probate. I've seen a lot of states that if you have less than $60,000, you're not going to go through probate. It's not worth it for anybody. For an estate above $60,000, there are requirements that you're going to need to go through probate. So it's kind of one of those rites of passage when people pass on.
Yeah, I think one of the cruelest and maybe most unconstitutional things that happens in America is the inheritance tax.
Oh
But
yeah.
we're not going to get off on that right now. That's
Nope.
a topic we could spend a little time hammering into the ground, but we're not going to win and we're
Hmm.
not going to change it. But I
That's
think it's
right.
evil because
Yep.
the people that earn that money pay taxes on it, and they pay taxes on everything that they have in those assets. And now the children have to pay taxes on what's already been taxed. And
Hmm.
usually they end up having to sell off a good bit of the family estate just to pay those stupid inheritance taxes. Just
Well, that's right.
an immoral money grab by the government. All right, that's my rant for today. Let's get back to the questions. Miller, does a living trust have to file taxes?
Typically not, but then again, there are exceptions. And if you're operating a business within the living trust, then yes. So once again, it depends. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Typically not. I mean, if you are the trustee and let's say you and your spouse are the trustees, the trust or the assets in the trust do generate income. You typically simply report that as personal income. But
Yeah.
then again, if there's a business in the trust, we can have an S corporation trust and have to file its own tax return. So there we
Hey,
are.
you guys know, those of you that know me on the call, I joke around a lot, but I also sit down and really think things through. And when I got when I got into this whole idea of these Wyoming and Nevada and all this, all right, so Wyoming has no sales tax. Nevada has no income tax. So I'm going to have a company in Nevada and I'm going to buy the goods from Home Depot in Wyoming, but pick them up in Georgia and South Carolina where I'm doing the flips. And so I won't pay any income tax and I won't pay any sales tax. And this is great. There's only one problem with that. It
Doesn't
doesn't
work.
work.
No.
You can't do that.
That's right.
So when you start getting clever, it's very possible to get too clever by half. And
Yeah.
that's when you need to talk to somebody who could just say, now, thanks for playing, but that's just not going to win.
That's
All right.
right.
Brenda, what relationship should life insurance policies and retirement accounts, et cetera, which have beneficiaries designated have with living trust? That's a good question.
Well, there can be ways that you can designate the trust as
The
the
beneficiary of the
thing, let's call it that, that inherits. So, in other words, the beneficiary of your retirement account could be the trust, and the advantage of that is now the money that comes from the retirement account into the trust is going to be distributed according to the terms of the trust, which is probably how you wanted it to go anyway. Um, I think there was what was the first part of that question?
life
I
insurance
didn't answer that.
policies.
Life insurance. There you go.
Yeah.
Um, as long as the estate tax exemption is $11.58 million for a married couple, half of that for a single person.
That's going to change soon.
Well, and it may, and that would be sad if it did. But as long as that is the case, most people are not going to be subject to the estate tax. And therefore, life insurance would probably not push them above the estate tax exemption amount. Now, if it did, then, and I've represented lots of wealthy clients that this is the case, we set up what is called an irrevocable life insurance trust so that it is not any death benefit that is paid by the insurance company goes to the trust, does not go into your estate, and therefore does not increase the amount of the estate, which would otherwise put it over the exemption amount. And that effectively means that you do not pay estate taxes, even if the total between the irrevocable life insurance trust and the estate is above the exemption amount. You would not pay estate tax.
That's pretty smart. I like that. All right. So I'm digging down deep into the recesses of something I may have heard some time ago, but I'm thinking about when you have assets in a self-directed IRA and you pass, um, is it true that there's a revised basis for the value of those? So what your children inherit has a basis that's based on current value, not the value that you had when you
Yeah.
bought it. All right.
Well, as a general rule, and there can be exceptions to this, but as a general rule, if you own, let's say, real estate, and you pass on, the kids will inherit it at fair market value. So, in other words, the basis jumps up from your basis to a fair market basis,
Right.
which means in real life that the kids can turn around and sell it tomorrow, and they have no gain.
Right.
They don't have to report any gain, which means
Yeah.
no capital gains tax, which, by the way, there is a proposal in this new administration to eliminate the capital gains tax, which would also eliminate 1031 tax-free exchanges and create a huge, terrible mess. So let's hope that provision doesn't go anywhere.
Well, that would be interesting if we could eliminate capital gains. I guess it wouldn't, unless they specifically eliminated the 1031 exchange, that would effectively eliminate the need for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, if capital gains are taxed at ordinary income tax rates, what's the point of doing a 1031 tax-free exchange? It wouldn't work.
All right. One of my secret goals is to become big enough and bad enough that I need to have a shelf corporation in the Caymans and a Cook Island trust. You set those up?
No, I don't. I stay domestic. There are plenty of good lawyers who do that, but just be cautious. I mean, that would, let's put it this way. Even though we may not like the current state of affairs in the country, somebody may not be happy with that. This is still the most politically stable country in the world. And it's not likely that, there's going to be some kind of civil disturbance that's going to put your money in the U.S. at risk. I mean, people from all over the world go offshore in the United States to bank here, for plenty of reasons, for those reasons alone. So, you've got to have a really good reason to go offshore. And incur that level of complication and expense. Now, there are going to be some situations where that's perfectly appropriate, but for the normal real estate investor, not necessary.
Yeah, I was just kind of playing around.
Yeah, I figured.
I haven't figured out. I haven't figured out what is the threshold when I'm going to need something like that.
Well, I remember Mitt Romney had $200 million in his estate, and he did have an offshore account.
Yeah, he had 99 million in his self-directed Roth.
Holy smoke!
Yeah,
Nice. Nice tax-free money coming out of that.
Yeah. And then, so I guarantee you he didn't get 99 million in that by making the minimum or the maximum contribution every year for 30 years.
No, I guarantee
Yeah.
that's right.
That's
Yeah.
being shrewd inside of your Roth, everybody. But that's a topic for a different day. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, this has been fantastic. Wouldn't you all agree? Let me hear you. And let me see the sevens in the chat. And I know that they're going to fill up the chat with sevens. We want to get you back. What I want to do right now is give you about 5 minutes to collect your thoughts for a final parting shot of inspiration for everybody here on the call. Yeah, the chat's filling up with sevens. And so I'm going to play this week's property pairing video for everyone's enjoyment. Please be sure to go to YouTube and smash the like button and subscribe. And I'll keep making the property pairings videos. But after this video, Bob is going to come back with a final word for tonight. Here we go.
And back to the harsh reality of the big city. We've got construction going on, people milling about. Pretty soon there will be a fire truck going by. I am sure of it. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this property, and I'm showing you pictures over my shoulder here of this property in Opelika, Alabama. I don't think I've ever seen a manufactured home that has his and her master bathrooms, but this house has them. And you can see some pictures of them here as we're going through, and some little before and after. This property was purchased for right around $52,000 to $53,000, about $20,000 spent on the rehab, and went on the market for $120,000. And the investors tell me that the phone is ringing off the hook, probably be under contract within a week. That's exciting. That's not really a home run, but it's a good solid single. It's a pretty sweet deal. And if you could do one or two of these every month, then you would be all right. You'd be on your way to kind of paying your bills and making your way forward in this business. Am I right? Okay, so now we got to think about what goes with a sweet deal in Alabama. Just happen to have just the thing. Right over here in my humidor, I have just something that evokes the countryside, because we're out in the country a little bit. This is a Kentucky fire cured. That's easy for me to say. A Kentucky fire cured cigar made by Drew Estate, and it's one of the more interesting cigars I've ever tried. When you smell it, it actually smells like wood smoke, and that's funny to me, to have a cigar that smells like smoke, but it doesn't smell like cigar smoke. It smells like the smoke that you smoke when you're smoking meat, and so that's a good thing for me. But also it has kind of a sweet taste to it. All right, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the tasting notes to it as I I'm going to go ahead and cut it right here. All right. And clean it up a little bit. Get it ready. Now, several people asked me about the cut that I used last time. This is a V cut. I like the V cut. But now we've got to match this with a whiskey. So here we have, I did some research and came up with this. This is Clyde May's Alabama style whiskey. What is Alabama style whiskey? Well, Alabama style whiskey is basically, it starts as bourbon and then they run it through a couple of other processes, which they don't really say a whole lot about. Clyde May lived outside the law. He was a moonshiner by trade and craftsman and by heart. Using a hand-built copper still, fresh Alabama spring water, and the finest local grains, he vowed to make the best darn whiskey Alabama ever tasted. What is Alabama-style whiskey? It's Clyde's proprietary process that makes this 4-year-old American whiskey unusually smooth. Clyde May's whiskey starts with a nose full of green apples and peach, met with a creamy, straight bourbon wood spice that smooths to a lingering finish of fresh orchard fruits and spice. Raise the glass to a genuine iconoclast and an American hero. All right, so we'll see. We'll see if we can find the green apple. I'm still waiting for a taste of dill. That was last time. All right, so we pour this in here. Little air work its way into that thing. Put that over there. Get the cigar going here. And this is the correct way to light a cigar, in case you're wondering. If you puff on them, you tend to burn the wrapper, and you don't want to taste burnt wrapper. Now, this cigar is also called a Fat Molly, the genuine Kentucky fire-cured cigars. I have to say it's very interesting. It's as interesting as his and hers master bathrooms in a manufactured home in Opelika. And then here's Alabama-style whiskey. I detect notes of caramel, green apple, and Opelika. That's it. You got a property you want me to pair with a perfect whiskey and cigar? Send it to propertypairings@flippingamerica.net. I will match it up perfectly. Guaranteed, or double your money back. It's free. Propertypairings@flippingamerica.net. See you soon.
Okay, nice little break for a little bit of fun. And Alabama whiskey is fine. I've had smoother, but it was fine. That property now, that video's not quite a week old. That property has shown 4 times every day this week. Doesn't have an offer yet, but I checked on it a little while ago to see, but maybe something's coming pretty soon. All right, Bob, we sure have enjoyed having you on the show tonight. Thank you so much for taking time. And your expertise is impressive. Your wisdom is astounding. And I just personally appreciate you so much. And the people in the group have been very appreciative in what they've said in the chat. We do want to get you back to do a full seminar. You and I will talk about that later, my friend. Mm-hmm. But right now, I ask you to collect your thoughts and give us a word of wisdom as we depart tonight.
All right. Well, you've never seen a football team win a game with a great offense and a bad defense. They've got to be equally good to win the game. If when you go into battle, you have both a sword and a shield. And how long do you think you'd last without the shield? And that's the defense. When you have offense and defense together, you have more money because you're making more and you're keeping more. When you have more money, you have greater financial security. And when you have greater financial security, you finally have peace of mind. And that's priceless. That's what everybody's working for. That's why we get up in the morning and work so hard. So if you want to have better peace of mind, sleep better at night, do some good planning and make sure that your assets are protected, that you've examined every possible way that somebody could sue you and take it away from you. We foreclose every type of vulnerability by getting you structured in the proper way, and that lets you sleep peacefully at night, and that's peace of mind. That's what it's all about.
All right. Thanks, Bob. And that was terrific. Appreciate that. And as y'all can tell, we like to have a little bit of fun. We also take on some serious topics and get a lot of great education, information, inspiration. And I want to thank you for taking your hour to this hour to join us here. We're back next Wednesday for REI Tech, and next Thursday night for creative exit strategies. And always massive value, completely free to be on these calls. And you also can watch the replay. We don't have to send the link to you anymore. This is on YouTube. It will be on YouTube the minute I click goodbye, and you'll be able to watch it as often as you want. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. All right, they're all gone.
Yeah.
Actually, we're still broadcasting on Facebook and YouTube, so we probably need to shut up. Anyway, all right, let's talk tomorrow about getting you back for real. Okay,
Sure.
this will be in the outtakes.
Happy to.
All right, we'll see you.
Will do. Take care, Roger. Bye-bye.